It's actually my last day here since my last tour. Another thing, we'll be passing through a series of self-locking, self-closing doors. I will open with my key card here, so please make sure you guys will hold the door for the person next to you so that no one's getting locked inside the brew house. Finally, there is no eating, drinking, smoking, or vaping on today's tour, so unless the only exception to that will be those samples we provide you. I just ask that you only have those samples wherever they're being served. Don't take them out to the street. You can't bring open containers of alcohol on the streets of Milwaukee. If you're not drinking today, no worries. We do have soda and water options available as well. You can just ask myself or the bar staff. We're more than happy to set you up with those. Finally, there will be one bathroom stop at the Miller Inn. So if you guys will use the bathroom anytime for the tour, I just ask that you wait until we get to that Miller Inn. Now with that being said, you guys ready to go on tour today? All right, sweet. Let's make our way down to the brew house. We get to learn how we make all that beer.
I'll start our tour off with some information about our campus. We are 83 acres large with 79 buildings scattered throughout the entire property. We employ around 2,000 people here in Miller Valley. About 1,200 of those folks work with the campus, and about 800 of them are actually on the factory floor. We're here Monday through Fridays, and then we are packaging and distributing 24/7 here all year round. It's also his last day as well. Alright guys, let's stop here and gather up by this fire hydrant, everybody. I'd like to introduce us to a very special guest joining us on today's tour. You've probably seen her a little bit throughout the valley. She's actually right above us right now. That is the Lady in the Moon, or the High Life Girl, the mascot of one of our flagship beers, Miller High Life. We started making it all the way back in 1903, and around that time was also when her origin story began. So back in 1993, shortly after we released the beer, one of our marketing executives was on a hunting trip with his friends in northern Wisconsin. Now he ended up getting separated from his hunting party and got very lost in the woods. He was so lost, in fact, he spent the entire day wandering around until he fell asleep underneath the tree. And while he was sitting under that tree, he had a very strange dream. He dreamt of a lady sitting in a crescent-shaped moon, holding a High Life glass with her hand, afraid to be pointing in one direction with her pinky finger. So when he woke up, he decided to follow the direction she was pointing, and sure enough, he made it back to his camp and found all his friends again. He considered her a good luck charm, drew her down a little notepad, and in 1907, she officially became the mascot of Miller High Life. Now, is that story true? I'll let y'all be the judge of that. I'd also like to point out that bridge above our heads right now, guys. That is our real famous beer bridge. We built it all the way back in 1975. It connects our road packaging facility where we do all of our bottling and kegging with our distribution warehouse, which we'll be checking out later. We have 3 massive conveyor belts on there, which can carry around 250,000 cases of beer across it every single day. It actually looks like on that very top one, there's some beer cases going across right now. We'll continue on to the brew house, folks. Follow me.
So I'll give you the story. Back in 2000, once they bought us, they started to sell off part of the tours. And the U.S. government gets involved, and they pull into trust on it, having Miller is then so they mandated that, as soon as they sell off, that was the case that the party will have to go and get the other half. Yeah, it wasn't a huge anti-trust suit, it was just a fair market practice. Yeah. Almost.
All right, everybody, we'll stop at the corner of the street here and wait for this light to change. In the meantime, I'd like to draw y'all's attention to this building right here. This is our historic stables, which we built all the way back in 1896. We actually use it to hold all the horses we use to ship our beer around, because back in the 1800s, we did not have cars. That first floor there was where we had all those wagons that the horses were drawn around. It was like a garage of sorts. Then there would have been a ramp going up to the second floor there. Our second floor was our stables. We could hold up to 125 draft horses on that second floor, each one of them weighing around 2,000 pounds each. The third floor then was where we had all the handouts to feed those horses. Now by 1930, we no longer had any horses on our campus because we fully converted over to automobiles to ship our beer around. So we converted this space into an employee cafeteria on the first floor, and then some offices and corporate meeting areas on the second and third floor. We'll cross the road in just a second, guys. All right, follow me, everybody. Can everybody hear me all right with those machines groaning in the background? All right, sweet. That building behind me is pretty special. It's our historic brew house. It was constructed between 1886 and 1888. It was the flagship product of our founder, Frederick Miller, back when he was in charge of the brew house. At the time it was operational, there would have been two massive copper brew kettles, which could do about 425 barrels of beer every single week. That was a pretty big number back for 1886. But just reference, we have 6 stainless steel brew kettles in our active brew house, which is behind you guys, and each one of those brew kettles can do about 590 barrels of beer every 90 minutes, about 20,000 every single day. So we've really upgraded our scale of production as the years have gone on. But back then, that 425 a week was considered state of the art. Now, unfortunately, Frederick Miller died about a month before the completion of that brew house, so we never got to sample any of the beer coming out of there. We did put his name at the very top of the building, though, in order to pay him homage. You also see above his name a weird six-sided star with a bunch of dots surrounding it. That's actually called the Brewmaster Sigil. It dates back to 13th century Germany. It was like a diploma of sorts for brewers. A lot of lords and kings at the time in Germany would have a brewmaster assigned to their court. So that brewmaster had to go through certain training to make sure that they were certified to brew for a king, and that star was what you got at the end of that training. That was your diploma to show that you could brew great beer. When Frederick Miller and a lot of German brewers came to a city like Milwaukee, which was full of German immigrants, they put that star on top of their brew house as an advertising tool, because Germans walking through the valley. Yeah, that's why I said stay off the road, guys, yeah. So as Germans were walking through the valley, they would notice that star up there and recognize that was a symbol of quality beers. They want to buy your beer. That building behind us right now is our active brew house. It was built in 1943 by the grandson of our founder, Frederick C. Miller. We're going to head in there in just 1 second, but I want to remind you guys, this is the one optional part of our tour today. It is 56 steps to reach the top of the brew house and about 90 to 95 degrees up there right now. So that heat and that walk isn't your thing, no worries at all. We do have a nice air-conditioned waiting room you can hang out in. I just ask that you stay in that waiting room until we all return. Don't worry, we'll pick you guys up so you get all your beer. With that being said, are you guys ready to head to the brew house?
Yes.
All right, sweet, follow me.
We got everybody? Yes. Will anybody be choosing to stay down here? Just show of hands if you're staying down here. All right, we're all feeling adventurous. Great. You guys can follow me through that door. I will warn you in just a second. You are about to get hit with some heat and smells, so just be aware of that.
Yeah, I don't like it. It smells like a bonnet. It smells like a chicken.
It's actually 83 degrees up here, which is the coolest I've ever seen the brew house throughout my entire time working here. Usually on a day we are brewing, it's up to 100 to 110 degrees, depending on the weather outside and how many of these brew pails we're using. So y'all pick the right day to be up here. Normally we'd already be breaking a sweat. Congratulations everyone on completing the Miller Valley Fitness Challenge. I feel like you all deserve a reward. How do you guys feel about that? Sounds good, awesome. I think a beer would be fitting. Before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about how we actually make that beer. It all starts with one key ingredient here, our barley. Think of barley like the soul of the beer. Without our barley, pretty much nothing else in the brewing process can happen. The first thing we need to do with this barley is turn it into something called malt. That in itself takes about 2 steps though. The first step, we dunk this in water for 3 to 5 days so that these kernels you guys see in the barley here, they sprout and release starches and enzymes we need for later in the brewing process. The second step is we take those kernels off, we're going to throw in a massive furnace and roast them. Depending on how long we roast those kernels, it can really affect the flavor profile, the type of beer we're making. For example, if we only roast them for a little while, we can get this very light colored kernel. You guys see that? That's what makes your pilsners, your lagers, another light or another highlight, for example. If we roast them for a long time, we get this very dark colored kernel. That's what makes your porters or stouts, a beer like a Guinness, for example. Once that entire process is done, we have successfully created our malt.
That's all made over in Golden, Colorado. So once they're done with that malting process, they load it up on trains and ship it by rail all the way to this back of this facility. You guys might have noticed as we were walking over that bridge earlier, a train was actually going over our heads. That's the very train that delivers our malt every single day. When that malt comes around to the very back of this facility, a giant grain elevator is going to suck up all those grains and transport it to the very top of this building. In fact, half of this building is just a giant grain silo. We can store up to 12 million pounds of malt here in Miller Valley because we use about 1 million pounds of it every single day. So we're really chewing through that stuff. Once we have our malt here, we can finally start making that beer. Step one, we're going to take that malt and run it through some grinding pins, turn it into something called grist. You guys see that? We're doing this to break open the shells of that malt so our starch and the enzymes can be accessed by the yeast later in the brewing process. Step two, we're going to take that grist and throw it into a giant vat called a mash tun. We're also adding another thing to our mash tun, our water. If you guys didn't know, beer is about 90% water. It's actually the main thing you're tasting when you drink a beer. So we need to make sure our water tastes just as good as the rest of our ingredients. We actually get all of our water from the city of Milwaukee, which draws its water from Lake Michigan. When we get that city water, of course, they add in things like fluoride that we don't really want in our beer. So we actually have our very own water purification plant here in the valley. We purify that water up to an ultra high quality and edit it for taste purposes. Once we have that high quality water and that grist, we dump them both inside that mash tun and mix them up for a little while to create our mash. Think of mash like a giant bowl of oatmeal or porridge, pretty much looks and smells exactly like it. The only difference being that inside that mash, a bunch of sugars are starting to form due to the chemical reactions between the starch and the enzymes. Step three, we're going to take that mash and put it in this giant vat behind me called a water tun. Think of this like the world's largest coffee filter. When that mash goes through this water tun, there are a bunch of filters in there that strain out all the solids, so we're only left over with those sugars I was talking about. You guys might have noticed a strange smell when you first came into the brew house first floor. What you guys are smelling down there is called spent grain. It's left over of the brewing process. It's those solids that are taken out from the water tun. A lot of people comment that it smells like a barn down on the first floor. That's because those grains are actually used in cattle and horse feed. They're highly nutritious, so we donate the leftovers to local farms that can go towards that. But they do sit in these water tuns for about 3 to 5 days and get pretty hot and smelly. So that's where that notorious smell of our brew house comes from, those spent grains. So once our mash has made its way through the water tun and been filtered out successfully, we are left over with those sugars. We call that wort. Wort is German slang for sugar water and sweet water, and that wort is exactly what we need for step 4, the brew kettles. You guys see that brew kettle right there? You see on that giant pipe a black label that says cap 590 BBLs. That stands for 590 beer barrels, with one beer barrel being equivalent to about 2 kegs. So in each one of these 6 brew kettles, we can do about 590 barrels of beer every 90 minutes. We put our wort in there for that 90-minute period. We're going to heat it up to around 200 degrees or boil, let it cook up to a nice warm temperature. We're also going to add another very special ingredient, our hops. Hops are considered the spice of the beer. This is what gives beers very bitter taste, also acts as a preservative. There's a unique scent on these. You actually smell them? What do you smell? It's plastic, I'm just messing with you. Your nose is working right. This is the real deal right here. Here. See, I'm not messing with you this time. Yeah, no, it's if you want to pass it around, actually, you'll notice a really strong smell, exactly like a spice of some kind. Those pellets that you guys are passing around right now are actually what go inside those brew kettles. So if you guys see that little yellowish part of these hop leaves right here, we take those off, that's called hop oil, and we pelletize them. Take about 50 pounds of those hop pellets, throw them inside that brew kettle when we're heating it up, leave it in there for 90 degrees, and boom. We're done at the brew house, but we have not yet created our beer. In fact, not a single drop of beer is actually made at the brew house. That's all done in our next step. So, we're going to empty out those brew kettles via some underground pipes and run that boiling hot wort right under our feet to a building across the street with a giant American flag on top of it. That is our fermentation house. That's where that wort finally becomes beer. That's all because of one very special ingredient, our yeast. If you guys didn't know, yeast is a microorganism that loves to eat sugar. So we dump it inside that basically giant vat of sugar water. It starts to devour all of it and create 2 very special things in a chemical reaction. Number 1, carbon dioxide, aka the bubbles in your beer. And number two, you all know it, you all love it, it's the whole reason we drink beer. I heard it's over alcohol, exactly, yeah. That entire fermentation process takes about a week in total. Once it's done, that yeast is successfully eaten through all of that sugar, those chemical reactions have occurred, we have successfully brewed our beer. But we're still not done quite yet. If you guys didn't know, beer does take a little bit of time to mature and age and flavor profile, just like a wine or a bourbon, for example. So what we're going to do when we're done with that fermentation process is we're going to empty out those fermentation tanks, run that fresh beer through some underground pipes, right over to that building with the giant American flag on top, or sorry, the giant red Miller sign on top of it. That is our I house, our aging house. Think of it like a giant beer water tower. It's actually the world's tallest building dedicated to brewing. We can keep enough beer in there to give every American over 21 a 10-ounce sample. Our beer will sit in there for about 14 days to a month, depending on how long that flavor profile takes to age up. And once that's done, we have successfully finished the brewing process. We have a ready-to-go beer, so we're going to filter it out one more time, run some quality checks, and now it's ready to go in cans, bottles, kegs, your guys' refrigerators, and ultimately our stomachs. The entire brewing process takes about a month from start to finish, a little over, a little under, depending on what we're making. So our distributors have to order their beer about 6 to 8 weeks ahead of schedule. So if you guys go to the grocery store after the store to pick up a beer, that beer was actually ordered 2 months ahead of time. Before we get going, do you guys have any questions about the brewing process? Go ahead, yeah, what's up?
How do you do the consistency of like the amount of alcohol per beer? Does it have to be the same?
That's a good question. She's asking how we do the consistency, the amount of alcohol per beer. So inside those fermentation tanks, there's actually that computerized monitors they monitor how much alcohol is being produced during that chemical reaction. If too much is produced, we actually distill down that batch, distilling basically burning off the alcohol. That's how we actually make NAs. If there's too little, we can actually, if there's too little, yeah, we can distill it back up as well. Yeah. It really just depends on like what the computers say, and we distill it up or down depending on what we need to get into. Yeah. Any final questions? All right, sweet, sounds good, guys.
I have a fun fact though. The spec can also be used to make bread.
The spec bread can be used to make bread?
I made it very good.
Yeah, you're correct. It's still a bread that's good to use. It just smells good, but yeah, it's pretty healthy still. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm a little thirsty after hanging out here this week. Go for another drink. How about you guys? Yeah, that's what I like to hear. We're going to make our way down those stairs in just a second to cross over to the caves, where it is a cool 60 degrees, and you guys will get to sample these champagne beers, Miller High Life. So why don't y'all follow me? Yeah, that's a good question. We can just still up or down.
Well, I just think like something like this, like in a brewery, you know, free form.
Right.
Like, that can help out.
That's something you're doing
Beer
right.
when you're having the same beer. Yeah, but I think it's more fun when you have the individual ones that are different. It's a good piece of amazement. They'll make it smell like this building. For like, for like a day. I'll set up my
It's actually just on the other side of those buildings across the road there. Everything is contained on our campus. There's an entire other just like mechanical section back there. We also have like a water lab where if we're making a different beer, like a Coors Light, for example, you have scientists chemists who actually can edit the taste of the water to make it taste like Rocky Mountain spring water. That's how we can brew Coors Light here. Is they're changing it so the taste is consistent regardless of where it's made. Yeah. Do we have everybody? All right. Yep. Okay, cool. Sounds good. You guys can follow me. We'll make our way over to the caves.
What's that? Yeah.
90% water.
Yeah.
Technically, it will work. Calories too. It's a full meal. That's it. That's why the monks started making it.
Yeah. Yep.
They couldn't eat bread during their fast, but they realized we could just make bread and butter. Just a quick thing I'd like to direct our attention to these two buildings. You can't really see them right now. You look through the gate though, you might get a better view. The smaller of those two buildings is our plant HQ. That's where the entire brewery is managed out of. The larger of the two buildings with the giant glass window is our corporate campus. That's the headquarters of the Molson Coors Beverage Corporation. We'll cross the road now. We have about 1,200 people employed up in that giant glass building. We also have our very own employee pub up there. Employees get to drink for free, but I'm 21, 121. No, ask me for my number. I'm not gonna. I can't give you that for. I can't give you that for. Follow me, everybody. Welcome to the cage, guys. Your samples of high life right here. Once you guys have a sample, you can follow me further into the caves. What is up?
Yeah, just grab one.
Thank you.
Yeah, good.
Yep.
They're all high level. Cheers. Cheers. Thank you.
Sorry about that, guys. You guys can actually head deeper to the caves. That entire chamber is free for you guys to explore. You can take a seat wherever you like. We also have some tables. Welcome to the caves, everybody. Right now, we're roughly 62 feet below ground. It's because there's a massive hill on top of these caves. The caves themselves are about 15 feet wide, 18 feet tall, and these giant limestone bricks that make up the walls are about 3 feet thick each. We've been talking a lot about the brewing process, so I think it's time to go over some history. Our story here in Miller Valley starts all the way back in 1849, when two brothers named Charles and Lorenz Best decided to start their very own brewery on this spot. They named that brewery the Plank Road Brewery, and it also contains these caves, which were also built in 1849, pretty much all by hand. They were dug out with shovels, pails, and pickaxes, and they used to extend about 600 feet beyond that mural there. Now, when the Best brothers stood most famous for working with Captain Frederick Pabst, they started up PBR. Before they ended up with Captain Frederick Pabst, they tried their hand at running their own brewery, that Plank Road Brewery, and they sucked at it. The Best brothers were not the best businessmen. Within 3 years of opening that brewery, they actually went completely broke. So they had to sell it off in an auction by the bank in 1855. During that same time, someone has just immigrated from Germany to America to start his very own brewing company. A man by the name of Frederick Miller. Now, Frederick Miller, he lands in New Orleans and decides to make his way up the Mississippi to tour the country to find the very best spot to start up his brewery. As he's making his way up the Mississippi, he decides to stop here in Milwaukee, and he very quickly notices three special things about our city. Number one, to the east, that giant body of water named Lake Michigan, which would give him all the water he needed for his beer. Number two, to the west, a bunch of farms near Watertown, Wisconsin, which would give him the barley and oats he needed. And number three, a bunch of German immigrants living in Milwaukee who absolutely love to drink beer. So when Frederick Miller sees this place, he decides it would be great to set up his brewery, so he ends up placing a bid on that Plank Road Brewery, which had just gone on for sale. That bid was worth around $2,370, which is $90,000 in today's money, and he ends up winning that bid.
Now for reference, he got these caves, a fully functional bar and brewery, 10 acres of land, all the horses and workers he needed for only $90,000. So I'd say he did pretty well for himself. When Frederick Miller takes over that Plain Grove Brewery, he changes his name to Frederick Miller, and he renames the Plain Grove Brewery Frederick Miller's Plain Grove Brewery. That was in 1855, and once he started brewing there, the Miller Valley has been here ever since. So these caves were built in 1849, but we started brewing in the valley in 1855. They predate us by about 6 years. They're also very special for one reason. They were a refrigerator before refrigerators. You see, back in the 1800s, we didn't have a great way of keeping our beer cold, besides really just burying it underground and filling that cave with ice. So what we have is we have that cave extending about 600 feet. We got that barrel there with 10 offshoot caves branching off this main tunnel and giant racks lining the walls on either side of these caves. There would be around 12,000 barrels of beer contained in these caves, with each barrel on those shelves being separated by a block of ice coated with sawdust. That way we could keep this place a cool 44 degrees all year long. In the winter months, we have people with giant metal saws go out, cut out those blocks of ice from our local lakes and rivers, hoist them onto their shoulders, walk back here to the caves, and then any sawdust left over from the barrel making process would be used to coat that ice so we could keep it fresh all year long. The process worked pretty well at keeping our beer cold, but as you can imagine, it was quite expensive and inefficient. By 1900, with the advent of mechanical refrigeration, the Miller family was quick to switch over to that, as it was much more cost-effective and efficient than manually cooling down 8 caves. By 1906, pretty much nothing was being stored down here. One day a work order came in for a bunch of guys to come down here, clear out whatever remained in these caves and transfer them to the last of the refrigerators and seal these caves off. And thus, this cabin was forgotten about for the next 50 years. That's right, throughout World War I, Prohibition, and World War II, no one knew these caves were down here. That was up until about 1949. That's when the grandson of our founder, Frederick C. Miller, is overseeing unprecedented expansion for our brewery. Frederick C. Miller actually oversaw the construction of that brew house, the aging house, some storage warehouses, and a bunch of other buildings, including that fermentation building. When they were building that fermentation building, the workers accidentally broke through the ceilings of these caves and rediscovered them untouched for nearly 5 decades. They actually found these Cooper's tools right here, Cooper's being an old-fashioned word for barrel makers, lying around on the ground left behind back in 1906. This place was pretty much a time capsule when it was rediscovered. And as you can imagine, Frederick C. Miller decided it would be a shame to seal this place up and forget about it again. So we wanted to turn it into something new and great. Unfortunately, he did fill in and seal up that back 600 feet in those 10 extra caves. That was for structural purposes, just so nothing above us caved in. But then he had this chamber right here, reinforced, redone, and reopened as a center for tours and a beer museum. So ever since 1949, we've been doing a lot of fun stuff down here. Although mostly nowadays we actually use it for private events. We do a lot of concerts and corporate dinners down here. The acoustics space is pretty good for that. We've actually had people married on this platform right behind me. We've done a very special event one time called Beer Yoga. I'm not really sure what that was about, but I'm told it was yoga for an hour in the caves, and he got really hammered at the Miller Inn, so probably a good time for all those involved. We do have one artifact, or artifacts I should say, left over from our museum days though. This display case right here. This is our monument to the dark ages of brewing, 1919 to 1933. Does anyone know what that time period was called? It's all right there, Prohibition, exactly, right on. Prohibition was when the United States government banned the sale of alcohol, and as you can imagine, our brewery was in a lot of trouble because we literally could not make our product, nevertheless make money. In fact, over 700 breweries ended up going completely bankrupt during Prohibition, but the Miller family found a few clever ways to adapt and survive. One way we did that is we started making non-alcoholic beverages like lemon soda and root beer. We also started making something called a near beer. So laws for Prohibition specified that you could not sell a beer over 0.5%, so we sold highlights that were 0.499999%. They weren't really great, but if you drank enough of them, it would do the job eventually. We also had something here called a malt tonic. You guys see that? Our malt tonic was sold in 6-packs at about 15% ABV down at the pharmacy. You see, during Prohibition, alcohol was allowed to be contained in medicine at any volume. So we sold that as a cure-all for headaches, stomach aches, muscle cramps, whatever might have been bothering you. Again, guys, medicine, not alcohol. So if you wanted one of those, all you had to do was go to the doctor, complain about a sore throat or a stomach ache, pick up a prescription, and you can head down to the pharmacy, pick up a 6-pack of those, and hopefully feel better. I think you guys get what I'm implying, right? Yeah, sounds good. So if you guys didn't know, during Prohibition, Miller was actually a pharmaceutical company. I'm sure we helped a lot of sick people feel better with our medicine. One final product I want to talk about is our malt syrup right there. Can everybody see that? Our malt syrup is actually the product which is credited as saving us during Prohibition. Funnily enough, it was a baking product of all things. It's actually a sweetener you'd add to your cookies or your pie to give it some more flavor. And on the label in big bold letters, it said, "Do not add yeast. It is illegal to add yeast. You will make beer if you add yeast." As you can imagine, that warning label was more of a nudge in the right direction of what this product was actually for. So people took the hint and they bought about 8 cases of that, dumped it in their bathtub, filled their bathtub up with water, sprinkled in some yeast, and boom, they would actually make beer with that stuff. It wasn't very great, but again, you didn't really have any other choices during Prohibition, so our malt syrup sold around 80,000 cases every single year. It was incredibly popular as essentially a DIY beer kit. One final thing I want to point out is that statue you guys saw as we made our way into the caves. That is the statue of King Gambrinus, the patron saint of beer. He's kind of a mythical figure from German folklore. Not really sure if he existed or not, but he's often credited as the first person to add hops to beer. They say that if you guys give a toast on your way out, your beer mug will never go empty, so make sure y'all do that. And before we leave these caves, anyone have any final questions about the history of Miller? Anything about the caves at all? All right, sweet. Well, if you think of anything, please let me know. What we're going to do now is make our way up those stairs and out the door. You guys will see on the right-hand side some dump buckets for your liquids. So if you can pour out your liquids in that dump bucket and throw your plastic cups away in the trash can. Once you dispose of that, you can follow me to the Miller Inn where there will be another sample waiting for us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because one of the legal things is for your own property, so you didn't sell it. So.
Well, that's where you look at like growth of Apple Valley. Right, the only reason that they say it is because they sold it to Apple Church. Well, that's crazy. They didn't have that. Yeah, it's a south side.
Also, churches can still buy wine.
Churches, the Catholic Church is the largest buyer of wine here in Prohibition.
Welcome to the Miller Inn, guys. Restrooms off the left if you'd like to use the restroom, and your samples are waiting for you up at the bar. Once you grab a sample, you may take a seat wherever you like. We also do have soda and water available that you can see as well. Yeah, I thought so. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Blue Moon, yep.
Oh, no, he's just flying.
Thank you.
Why did you last week?
Yeah. So I go back and give me medicine. Yes.
Oh, it's since that's the when you turn 21, not 20.
Yeah, that's actually
So that's like the drinking age. Birthday happened before that.
Okay.
That was like when I booked the tickets. Like, what's your
Welcome to Miller Inn, everybody. On the rooftop there, our third floor would have been an outdoor beer garden. The second floor right above us was a billiards hall. This first floor area was a bar, and that hallway we just walked down, it's called Stein Hall today, but back in the day, it was a 2-lane bowling alley. Fun fact, those bowling floors still do remain underneath the planks, but every 7 to 8 years we have to redo the wood because it sinks down and the bumpers from the bowling alley start to poke through the floor. This place was so incredibly popular for one main reason, that road out there. Today it's called State Street, but back in the day it was known as the Plank Road to Watertown. That's how we got our name, the Plank Road Brewery. It was actually a national highway out to Minnesota, so people were constantly walking to make their way out there. And this was like a rest stop of sorts. In fact, the last stop of civilization before you were camping out in the woods for a few weeks. People loved to come here, get a drink or 2 or 10 before they were going out and camping for a few weeks. So we were pretty popular because of that. Now, unfortunately, that was up until about 1919, when of course Prohibition happens. Now, as you can imagine, bars weren't really fun about the alcohol part, so the Miller family had to find a way to bring the clientele in here and keep the space profitable. What they ended up doing was turning it into an inn and loaning it out to an innkeeper by the name of Hans Stender. So when Hans got here, he got rid of all the billiard halls on the second floor and turned that second floor into a luxury apartment for himself and his family. He then came down to the first floor, got rid of all the bar and bowling alley stuff, and turned this space into a really crappy hostel. The rooms were less than a cubicle size large here in the Miller Inn. Bunk beds stacked 3 or 4 stories high, 3 or 4 bunk beds to a cubicle. He tried to cram as many people in here for as cheap as possible. It actually worked out pretty well for him. The Miller Inn was a pretty successful venture for Hans. He was able to keep it open well past Prohibition as an inn up until about 1949. That's of course when Frederick C. Miller steps onto the scene. You guys can actually see a photo of him right there by the American flag. Now when Frederick C. Miller gets here, he's doing the restoration for those caves down here. He's pretty excited about the history of Miller, so he decides, you know what, I want to restore this building to its former glory as well. So he takes Hans and his family out and moves in a guy by the name of Brooks Stevens. Brooks Stevens was a very famous Milwaukee designer and friend of Frederick's. He actually designed the High Life bottles, the building across the road, and also built our brew house and our I house. He's most famous, however, for one thing in particular, the Oscar Mayer Wiener Mocha. So, fun fact, the guy who did the hot dog car did this entire building in most of our brewery. Brooks Stevens eventually turned this place into a traditional Bavarian-style beer hall with the help of some master brewing craftsmen, and he and Frederick reopened it as the Miller Inn. They gave it that name as an homage to the days when it literally was an inn. And ever since then, we have been a bar on the site. We've had a lot of famous people pass through here throughout the years. You see, Frederick C. Miller, he went to Notre Dame during his college years and was a star football player there. So when he came here to the brewery, he still kept his ties with the NFL and the pro football world. He was actually a very good friend of the Packers. He was actually a volunteer offensive coach for the Packers. That was his weekend gig when he wasn't here at the brewery. So when he was back here on the weekdays, he'd bring all his friends from Green Bay down to Miller Inn to enjoy a few drinks. For example, Paul Hornung and Johnny Unitas were frequents, loved to come here and drink with Fred and also sign some autographs. When the Packers had some financial troubles during the 50s and 60s, Fred C. Miller convinced them to split their time between Milwaukee and Green Bay to make ends meet. So without Fred C. Miller, potentially we would not have the Green Bay Packers here in Wisconsin. We have had some more recent celebrities that I see some reactions over there, unfortunately. Might be good for some of us, not so good for all of us yet. Now, we have had some more recent celebrities pass through here. Anyone here a fan of Luke Combs? You must, all right, sweet. About a year ago, Luke Combs actually kicked off a tour for US right here in Milwaukee, and he had a bit of a pregame dinner before that tour here in the Caves. He had a nice dinner for himself and his crew, and then he decided to come up here and enjoy a few drinks at the bar. They might have enjoyed a few too many, because Luke Combs got pretty drunk and he ends up on the roof of the brew house, shotgunning a Miller Lite overlooking the city of Milwaukee with the brewmaster. So I told that was a pretty fun day to be working here in Miller Valley. Is anyone here a fan of the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City? Anyone at all? You'd be surprised, usually one person raised their hand. About a year ago, we also shot an episode of the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, of all people. And I'd like to introduce us to another very special guest on our tour, Javi over there. He's our own celebrity here in Miller Valley. He was featured in that episode of the Housewives, so please round of applause. His face was featured for all of 3 seconds during his segment. So he does do autographs, but it is $20 a piece. I'm his agent, so you gotta talk to me before you go to him. He was regaled with a story about Jeffrey Dahmer, of all people, in that episode. So if you go and watch that episode of Real Housewives, you can see him just smiling awkwardly at that story. So ask him about that. He loves to talk about it. Now with that being said, I'm going to give you guys about 3 minutes to finish up your drinks. It's going to end around 2:21. Does that sound good to everybody? Alright, sweet. You're free to wander around this space as much as you'd like, use the bathroom, and I'll also be up here if you have any questions. Okay. Long answer or the short answer? So, we were bought out in 2000 by a company called South African Brewing. And when they got us, they immediately started to sell off parts of their distribution network to multi-brewers. So we became a joint venture between two companies called Miller Breweries. Then in 2014, South African Brewery gets bought by Anheuser-Busch, mainly InBev. But when they get bought out, or when they get bought out by them, the U.S. government steps in and says that's violating antitrust laws. SAP has to sell Miller. So most of the brewers start to go, we already own half the company, we might as well just take it half. So they sold us off to most brewers, and in 2016, that deal completed, we joined Brewers. Yep. And before that, before SAP, we were in the hands of Philip Morris, the tobacco giant. Because we sold them in like 1965, I think.
I mean, if you might never see it.
Miller and his Airbnb actually died a horrific plane crash. And without any air in the Miller family, the family didn't really know what to do. So within 5 years, he sold it to Philip Morris. Okay? Yeah. So there are no Millers involved in the company anymore. They're still around, actually. It's not a
Pretty cool. So it's part of our portfolio, but we don't necessarily own them.
So how often do you switch out the beers? Or are you doing multiple beers at once?
Okay, so each brew count can brew a batch of beer, so at once we can have 6 different batches being brewed. And then after that 90-minute brewing period, what they'll either do is just clean it out with water quickly or similar, or actually flush the thing in an hour-long cleaning process and then dump it in a completely new batch.
Okay.
So you're doing like a Miller Lite and Coors Light back to back in the same kettle. You just gotta flush it with water because they're pretty similar. But if you're switching from a Miller Lite to like a Lime Coors, for example, that's when you clean it out completely.
Yeah.
Do you guys do contract brewing for like the local breweries?
We do plenty of it. We actually were on contract with Pabst up until December of last year because they switched over to 80 InBev. And now we're on contract with Miller to start brewing some of their beer in the Midwest. We're actually, we also just became a distributor as well, so we just released Yingling in Chicago about a year ago. It's done pretty well. So hopefully within the next year or so, we'll come here to Wisconsin as well. I think it's about that time for us to get going, so if you guys could please place your glasses on the bar, finish up your drinks. Once you take care of that, you can follow me out of the door in, down the stairs, and over to South Packaging and Distribution.
Alright, sweet, you guys can follow me.
If they have a brewery out that's I have a friend who works at
Distribution, everybody. This is where we do the majority of our canning, and you guys are free to spread out along this entire hallway and take a peek on the beer. This line closest to us right now is C18, which almost exclusively makes Coors Light, and right now it looks like they're doing some maintenance on it. But if you guys head to the very end of the hall there, you'll see C19, another one of our canning lines. They're actually running some beer off that line right now. I'm not sure what it is, if someone can holler back at me. Yep. Look at our bottling process. Once those monitors do drop, you guys are free to return to the windows and look at all that great beer going by, and I'll also be wandering around if you have any questions. I'm also going to turn off the lights so that there won't be any annoying reflections if you guys want to grab a photo. Want to remind you guys again, you can go back up to the windows once those monitors drop. With that being said, enjoy the show, everybody.
The magic begins here in Miller Valley with the best natural ingredients. Our world-class brewers carefully mix, monitor, and test these ingredients as they go from mash tun to lauter tun to brew kettle. Frederick Miller's famous yeast is carefully added before fermentation. Then, after aging and filtering, the beer is ready to be packaged. About 60% of it goes into cans, 30% into bottles, and about 10% into kegs. The packaging process begins with fresh, new, shrink-wrapped bottles and cans. Each one thoroughly rinsed in warm water to meet our high standards. After rinsing, it's off to the fillers. This amazing machine can fill 1,200 bottles a minute. In slow motion, you can see the empty bottles being spun into position, carefully filled, and finally crowned, with each precision task being measured in split seconds. As fast as our bottles are filled, our cans are filled even faster, in large part because we don't have to worry about breaking glass. This machine can fill up to 2,000 cans per minute. That's a case and a half of beer every second. In real time, it's almost impossible to see what's happening. But when we drop down to slow motion, you'll see the empty aluminum cans have been filled with fresh beer, sealed with high-tech lids, and are being sent on their way to the pasteurizer. The pasteurization process is important because it gives our beer an extended shelf life, enabling us to store it unrefrigerated for up to 52 weeks depending on brand, without any change in flavor or aroma. That's where our special freshness date comes in. A high-speed laser printer shoots a freshness date onto the bottom of every can, the neck of every bottle, and the side of every case. This code tells distributors and retailers when to pull the beer off the shelf to make sure our consumers always get the freshest beer. We use a 7-character code. The first 3 letters are the month, the next 2 the date, and the last 2 the year. Miller Brewing Company invented freshness coding for beer and was the first brewer to put a freshness date on all of its products, including a 9-week code on its keg beer. And speaking of kegs, ours are filled across the street in North Packaging on a machine called the Keg-O-Matic. It fills 12 kegs at once, up to 12,000 per day. Keg beer is true draft beer, so it is not heat pasteurized, but instead stored in coolers at 34 degrees to keep it fresh. Molson Coors is also proud to be the only American brewer to offer true draft beer in cans and bottles. To produce Miller Genuine Draft and Miller 64, we use a special process called cold ceramic filtration. This process removes all impurities and results in great tasting packaged draft beer that does not need pasteurization, and that has the same shelf life as our other beers. Now it's time to label our bottles, so you know what you're drinking. These machines can apply neck and body labels to some 1,400 bottles per minute. Numerous quality inspections are performed throughout the entire brewing and packaging process. Along all of our packaging lines, laser scanners constantly check for imperfections. If any are found, the products in question are bumped off the line and sent to be recycled or repackaged. Now that the bottles and cans are all filled, sealed, egg-coated, and labeled, it's time to put them in boxes, what we call secondary packaging. The last step in the packaging process occurs here at one of our 11 computerized palletizers. Here, our packages are stacked onto pallets in layers of alternating patterns for maximum stability. All pallets are stretch wrapped before being loaded onto trucks and sent off to serve our thirsty customers.
All right, guys, watch your heads. Those monitors are coming up right now. In just a second, we're about to make our way over to distribution, the final stop on our tour. In order to head over to distribution, though, I need to open some safety gates, and we have to cross over some forklift highways. So please make sure you follow all my instructions. I'm gonna have you guys wait behind some yellow fences. Once I pull those safety gates out, you can cross to the other side of the forklift highway. Wait for me on the other side while I close those safety gates. Then I'll meet you guys there and we can continue across. That sound good to everybody? All right, sweet. Then I'm actually gonna meet you guys at the end of the hallway there, and we'll make our way down to distribution.
All right, guys, follow me. Wait behind you for 1 second. Yeah, basically. Prepare. Follow me.
Good for him.
Well, I like that Costco to me right here. Yeah.
All right, everyone. Welcome to distribution, the final stop in our tour today. This warehouse is about 200,000 square feet large, holding up to around 900,000 cases of beer. The craziest part is that within 24 to 36 hours, Everything you guys see out there will be gone, shipped out to its destination, and replaced with fresh beer, ready to do that entire process again. That's right, the turnover for this entire warehouse is about a day to a day and a half. We ship to about a 10-state radius comprised of the Midwest, down south to Missouri, over east to Michigan, and out west towards Montana and Minnesota. 20% of the beer we produce here in Miller Valley is going to stay in the great state of Wisconsin. About 40% will be going out to that 10-state radius I was talking about, and the remaining 30% will go to one city in particular. Anyone guess what city that is? Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's right, folks. Chicago. Chicago is drinking 10 states worth of beer every single day. And I was thinking, how could someone be drinking that much beer? And then I realized, I had to watch the Bears lose every year. Yeah, we drink 10 states worth. You guys look at the board, you'll see some of the beers we can do here. You're going to know we are one of 6 facilities in the Most Coors portfolio. The other 5 being Albany, Georgia, Trenton, Ohio, Elgin, Virginia, Fort Worth, Texas, and of course, Golden, Colorado, the largest single brewery in the world. The Most Coors acquired all these breweries. They divided the country up into 6 regions and assigned a brewery to each region. We got assigned the Midwest to make all the Miller Lite, Miller High Life, Coors Light, and over 60 different brands for the entire region. There are some exceptions to that though. The first one I want to talk about is Coors Banquet. We only make Coors Banquet out in Golden, Colorado because its recipe specifically calls for Rocky Mountain spring water. Wisconsin's a pretty cool state, but we do not have a Rocky Mountain here, so I'm only making that one out in Golden. The second exception is Lining Kugels. Only that exception works in our favor. 100% of all Lining Kugels products are made right here in Miller Valley. So no matter where you're drinking a Canvas or Shandy around the world, it's probably made on those lines we just walked past. Finally, Busy Hard Seltzer. Topo Chico Hard Seltzer in soda. That's a non-alcoholic energy drink. We don't make those ones either. They're actually made down in Fort Worth, Texas, where there is a dedicated gluten-free line. You also might have heard me talking about this in the Miller Inn. You might see some cans of Peroni out there, some Sol, some Pilsner Kelp on the board, and more some Canadian. Those are international imports. We don't brew them here in Miller Valley. They're actually made in their home country, shipped into us, and then we distribute them out to our 10-state radius. So no, we're not making most of the Peroni here. They're actually still made in their home countries, and then brought to us so we can distribute them out to our distribution network. If you have any more questions about the packaging or distributing process before we get rolling? All right. With that being said, then that does unfortunately conclude the talking portion of our tour today. We're still not done quite yet, guys. We still have one more sample. So what if I get everyone to do is please look at your wristbands. You guys will notice little strip with numbers on there. Everyone points that strip with numbers for me. That is your ticket to get your final sample. You're going to show me at the visitor center that little strip. I'm going to check that off. Once that's checked off, you can receive your final sample. It's whatever you'd like on tap. We also have some seltzers and some NAs as well if you're interested in those. You can also show that wristband to the gift shop counter to receive a free souvenir courtesy of the tour. On behalf of the Most Coors Beverage Company, thank you so much for coming out today and taking the tour, guys. Y'all were a great group, and I hope you learned something new. If you enjoyed the tour, my name is Owen. If you did not enjoy the tour, my name is Percy. Make sure you tell my boss that. Before we go any further, oh no, watch. Okay, does anyone have the time real quick? I just need to know real quick. It's Miller time, guys. Let's get up here.
Yeah, follow the tour sign.
900,000 something.
900,000 cases roughly, yeah.
Wow. In a day and a half.
It's more like 3 to 5 days actually, but that is our top speed.
Yeah.
We're just now doing it. Sure. Top capacity. Like for example, you might have heard in the video, we've heard like 9 million barrels a year here. We're actually on track. We can actually grow to 20 million barrels. We only do about 4 right now. Just demand's low for beer in the market right now. Wax away like kind of a year. Yeah, so I mean right now especially for a number of reasons, beer sales are lower. For one, Gen Z is bringing a lot. For two, with economic policies kind of fluctuating, the market's people down for it, so people just don't have the money to buy beer. But it happens every 5 to 7 years. There'll be a dip, but then it goes back up. Right now, like seltzers are spiking, and
No, it's pretty interesting. I couldn't remember that's my now I have 2 underage kids. I'm like, man, all they get freaking drunk before you get senior.
Right.
And before you go to control yourself. You need to like get a hammer. Know what it feels like. Kids are like, you know what, family, you've done wrong. Like, you're not my kid.
I mean, who knows? It might just be because, like, part of Gen Z technically isn't on the data registry because they're not. I mean, I got a Madison, and I know it's probably very skewed data sample, but it is insane how much.
Yeah, we all
there. Yeah. So, and most of them are definitely not legally supposed to.
That bright house across from one of my daughter's doors, they have no problem. I'll tell you that.
We're gonna head into the side door, guys. So follow me around to the side door.
We don't get a tour of the campus.
That'll open a little bit, actually. Yeah, actually, same guy wrote that.
Yeah.
Hey.
Kind of his thing, beer and hot dogs. Pretty good thing you'd be good at. You guys are all set. Thanks for coming out today. Thank you.
I don't know if I've ever had one. I'll take one of those as well. I've had all of those.
Hey, y'all set?
Thank you.
Can I help you?
Miller Lite.
There you go.
All right, thanks.
Can I do one?
The summer shady or the honey bites?
Honey Bites.
There you are, sir.
Thank you.
Did she get you?
Okay, guys, thanks for coming out tour today. My name is